Trust me, she catches the bus. She can't afford anything in here. He said it loud, right under the dealership's gold lettering, while his mistress giggled and filmed the showroom bends. He once promised that wife the world. Tonight, he wouldn't even buy her a coffee. But what he didn't know was why every worker on that floor went still the moment the valet whispered, "That's Mrs. Coleman." The husband's name was Roland Coleman, and he wore a $5,000 suit like a man who'd forgotten who paid for it. He had just plucked the car keys out of his wife's hand in front of the whole floor, his wife, Ifoma, standing there in a plain gray coat, and dropped them into the valet's palm like she was luggage he was tired of carrying. Beside him, Priscilla Vane leaned against the hood of that white Benz, red nails tapping her phone, filming Ifoma's face for a laugh she planned to save. And by the glass office at the back, Roland's mother, Odessa, watched it all and smiled the way a woman smiles when the plan is finally working. Ifoma did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She looked at the gold letters spelling Coleman Premier Motors above the doors, and then she looked at the young valet, Jelani, who had gone the color of chalk. Her hand closed around something in her coat pocket. A key, an old brass key worn smooth by another man's thumb across 30 years. Roland had never once asked what it opened. Before we go any further, welcome in. If you believe a quiet woman can be the most dangerous person in the room, do me a favor and tap that like button. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the turn this story takes, and tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from tonight? I want to know who's riding with Ifoma. Now settle in, because Roland just made the biggest mistake of his life, and he doesn't feel it yet. But he had not always been this cruel. To understand the man on that showroom floor, you have to go back 4 years to a smaller lot, a smaller sign, and a man named Solomon Okafor. Solomon was Ifoma's father. He had come to this country with 2 suitcases and a gift for engines, and he had built that dealership from a gravel lot and a rented tow truck into the busiest luxury floor in the county. He used to say a business was like a car. You can rev the loudest engine on the block, Ife, he told her, wiping grease from his hands, but without the key, you are just making noise. He gave her that brass key on her 25th birthday, not Roland, her. Roland had married Ifoma when the lot was already thriving, and he had a talent, a real one, for the front. He could sell a man a car and make him feel like he'd been done a favor. Solomon liked him, trusted him even. When Solomon's heart gave out on a Tuesday morning in the service bay, it was Roland who stood at the funeral with his arm around Ifoma, whispering, "Let me carry it, baby. You grieve. I've got the floor." And she let him. That was the thing she would blame herself for later. In her grief, she signed papers a lawyer slid in front of her, papers she barely read, and she let Roland become the face of the company, president, CEO, the name on the business cards. She stepped back into the house, into the quiet, into the gray coat. She let the whole world believe Roland built this. The world believed it. Roland started to believe it too. What the world did not know, what Roland had never bothered to learn, was what her father had actually done with his life's work. Solomon had not left the company to a man, he had left it to a trust, the Okafor Family Trust, and the trust had exactly 1 trustee, 1 beneficiary, 1 signature that could move a single brick of it. Ifoma, he had no idea. The coldness came slow, the way rust does. First, it was Priscilla, hired as a brand consultant, always in Roland's office with the door shut. Then it was the credit cards, quietly reissued in his name only. Then it was Odessa on Sunday dinner, patting Ifoma's hand and saying, "You've let yourself go, sweetheart. A man like Roland has needs. You can't blame a river for finding lower ground." Polite, pulled, a knife wrapped in a doily. Ifoma said little. She wore the gray coat. She took the bus some days on purpose because she liked to watch the city, and Roland turned even that into a joke at parties. My wife, the woman of the people. Everyone laughed. He thought her silence was surrender. He mistook the calm of a woman who holds the deed from the calm of a woman who has given up. The one man who knew the truth was Booker Ellison. Booker had been Solomon's oldest friend and the trust's protector, the one whose job it was to guard what Solomon built. He was 70, precise, and he never wasted a word. Ifeoma found him one evening in the empty service bay, running his hand along a workbench her father had built. "He's going to sell it, Booker," she said. "I heard him on the phone. A developer. He thinks it's his to sell." Booker did not look surprised. "Your father saw this coming," he said. "Not Roland exactly, but a man like Roland. That's why he built the trust the way he did." He tapped the bench. "There is a lock on this place stronger than any of them know, but I am not going to hand it to you, child. You are going to have to find your own way to turn the key, because if you win it by being handed it, they will take it back. If you win it yourself, it stays won." He picked up his hat. "Watch the woman, not the man. The man is loud, the woman is the engine." He left her with that. Watch the woman. Ifeoma did not sleep that night. The next morning she started watching Priscilla, and what she saw was not a mistress, it was a professional. Priscilla did not act like a woman in love. She acted like a woman on a payroll. She took her own meetings. She photographed documents on Roland's desk when he stepped out. Ifeoma, invisible in her gray coat, sat in the customer lounge and watched Priscilla slip a folded page into her purse, a page Ifeoma recognized by its blue cover. Trust paper, her father's paper. Priscilla had gotten to it first. That was the first new problem. The mistress wasn't chasing Roland's heart. She was collecting Ifeoma's inheritance, one photograph at a time, and she was faster than Ifeoma had been ready for. Ifeoma took the fear home and turned it into a plan. If Priscilla wanted the trust papers, then the trust papers were the battlefield. She called the bank that held the original documents, and that's where Roland made his first move. The account was frozen. Not empty, frozen. Roland had flagged irregular activity on every joint asset, cutting her access with a single phone call days before she'd even reached for it. He had felt something after the showroom. He was not a fool. He was a smart man who could smell a woman waking up. When she came home, he was waiting in the kitchen, calm, swirling brown liquor in a glass. "You've been making calls," he said, not a question. "I'm allowed to make calls, Roland." "Of course," he smiled. "I moved the closing up, by the way, the sale of the property, next Friday. I know how you hate a long goodbye." He set the glass down. "Sign the transfer when Booker brings it, and I'll be generous. Fight me, and you'll learn how cold the bus stop gets in January." He walked out. He thought he'd shown her the cliff. He actually shown her the clock. 1 week. Ifeoma stood in the kitchen and did something Roland would not recognize. She smiled, because a man does not freeze accounts and move a closing date up unless he is afraid of what's underneath them. Fear tells you where the treasure is buried. The middle of that week was a war fought in small rooms. Booker met her in a diner and slid a single page across the table, the trust's controlling clause. No asset of the Okafor Trust may transfer without the wet signature of the living trustee witnessed by the trust protector. He looked at her over his glasses. "That's me, and I will not witness a thing." One rung. He folded it away before she could keep it. "Hold your questions. There is more, but you are not ready. In time." She left the diner lighter than she'd been in a year. She had the lock. Roland could not sell without her hand on the page and Booker in the room, and Booker would never sit down. That lightness lasted exactly 2 days. On Wednesday, Roland played the card that turned the whole board over. He called Ipheoma into the glass office, and Priscilla and Odessa were both there, arranged like a jury. Roland laid a document on the desk and turned it to face her. She looked down and felt the floor tilt. It was a power of attorney. Her signature was at the bottom, her real signature, dated 3 years ago, the month after her father died, the month she'd signed everything Roland put in front of her while she could barely see through the tears. The document gave Roland Coleman full authority to act for Ipheoma Coleman in all matters of trust and estate.
"You signed this," Roland said gently, almost kindly, and that was the cruelest part. "You gave me the wheel yourself, baby. I didn't take anything. Grief doesn't undo a signature." Odessa dabbed her eyes for show. Priscilla filmed. Ipheoma walked out of that office and had to hold the doorframe to stay standing. She called Booker from the parking lot, and even his calm voice cracked. "That POA," he said slowly, "if it's genuine, it may reach the trust. It may let his signature stand in for yours. Ipheoma, this could hold." She had thought the lock was hers. Roland had a key to it that she had cut herself in the dark in her grief. That was her real setback. For the first time, she believed she might actually lose her father's floor. She did not go home. She drove to the cemetery and sat by Solomon's stone in the dark, the brass key cold in her fist. "I gave it away," she whispered. "I handed him the key." And in the silence she heard her father's voice, the old line, "Without the key, you are just making noise." She sat up. Roland had a key, but a power of attorney is a copy of a key, and a copy can be broken by the one who cut the original if she could prove she'd been deceived into cutting it. The question wasn't whether Roland had authority, it was how he got it, and the only person who had photographed every document on Roland's desk, who kept receipts on everyone, was the woman filming her humiliation with red nails. "Watch the woman," Booker had said. Ipheoma finally understood why. She found her way to Priscilla the next morning, not with a threat but with a mirror. She sat down across from the mistress at the coffee bar and said quietly, "He's going to leave you off the paperwork, you know, whatever he promised you. Men who forge one signature will forge two." She let it land. "I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to tell you Roland is a sinking man and you're chained to his ankle. The only question is whether you're smart enough to get off before the water." Priscilla's smile didn't move, but her eyes did. "And what makes you think I'm chained to anything, sweetheart? I keep my own boat." Cold, controlled. "I've got a folder on that man that could sink him twice over. I don't need your pity." She stood, gathered her purse, and delivered her signature line soft as silk. "Some of us don't wait for the bus, Ipheoma. We buy the road." She walked off, proud of herself. She had just told Ipheoma the one thing that mattered. A folder existed, and Priscilla was already thinking about which way to jump. Greed had cracked the door. Now Ipheoma just had to make jumping look profitable. She spent Thursday building the trap. She had Booker request, formally, the original power of attorney for review before closing, a routine ask no lawyer could refuse. She had a forensic document examiner, a woman named Marlene who owed Solomon a debt of loyalty older than the marriage, quietly ready to look at the ink. And she did the boldest thing of all. She let Roland believe he was winning. She sent word through Odessa that she would come to the closing Friday to sign what needs signing. Roland relaxed. Roland got greedy. Roland told the developer the deal was clean. Roland's last move came Thursday night. He tried to lock Booker out, sent an email removing him as trust protector, effective immediately, claiming conflict of interest. It was a good move. If Booker wasn't in the room, no witness, no lock. But Roland had forgotten who wrote the trust. Only the trustee could remove the protector, and the trustee was not Roland. The removal wasn't worth the paper. Booker forwarded it to Ipheoma with 2 words, "He's panicking." Friday came. The closing was held on the showroom floor itself because Roland wanted the developer to see the empire he was selling. A long table under the gold letters, Roland at the head in a new suit, Priscilla at his right, folder in her lap, Odessa beside her, the developer's man, Preston Vane, and yes, Afema had noticed the name Vane, the same as Priscilla's, filed it and said nothing, sat across with a briefcase of certified checks. The whole staff stood along the walls because Roland had ordered them to witness the future. Jelani, the valet, stood by the door, twisting his cap. Afema walked in last in the gray coat, and Roland gestured to the empty chair at the foot of the table like a man tossing a coin to a beggar. "Glad you could make the bus," he said, a few nervous laughs.
She did not sit. She reached into her coat and set one object on the table with a small brass click. The key, Solomon's key. "Before anyone signs," she said, and her voice was so calm the room leaned in, "I'd like to read something into the record." She nodded to Booker, who opened a leather folder. "This dealership is not owned by Roland Coleman. It never was. It is held by the O'Coffer Family Trust, established by Solomon O'Coffer, and it has exactly one trustee." She let the silence stretch. "Me." Preston Vane's pen stopped in the air. Roland laughed, but it came out wrong. "He signed a power of attorney," he said quickly, tapping the document in front of him. "I have full authority. Read it, her own hand." "I did sign it. Booker, would you read the trust's controlling clause?" Booker read it, slow and clear. "No asset transfers without the wet signature of the living trustee, witnessed by the trust protector. A power of attorney," Booker added, "cannot exceed the authority of the trust document itself. The trust requires the trustee's own hand, witnessed by me, not a proxy, not an attorney in fact. Her hand, my eyes." He closed the folder. "I do not consent. There is no sale." For one bright, roaring second, Ifeoma had won. She saw it on the staff's faces. Preston Vane started closing his briefcase. Then Odessa spoke, sweet as pie. "But dear," she said, sliding a fresh page from her handbag, "I am also named, a co-trustee. Solomon named me when Ifeoma was too fragile to serve, and I consent to the sale. I witnessed it. I sign." She laid down a paper with her own signature and a notary stamp dated that morning. "Grief made you unwell, Ifeoma. Someone responsible had to hold the key." The room turned again. Booker's face went gray. Ifeoma stared at the paper, a co-trustee appointment she had never seen, stamped and real. Her win collapsed in her hands. If Odessa was a lawful co-trustee, then Odessa plus Roland's POA could move the floor without her. The developer reopened his briefcase. That was the moment Ifeoma had been building toward all week. She did not look at Odessa. She looked at Priscilla. "You notarized that this morning, didn't you, Priscilla? Your stamp is on the bottom." Priscilla's chin lifted, proud, until she saw where the road bent. "And you also photographed the real trust register 3 weeks ago. You have a folder. I think you already know what I'm about to say." "Say it," Priscilla said, but the silk had gone thin. "Solomon O'Coffer named no co-trustee ever." Ifeoma turned to Marlene, who had risen quietly from the back with her own folder. "This is Marlene Osei, forensic document examiner. She reviewed the power of attorney and this co-trustee appointment last night." Marlene laid 2 enlargements on the table. "The POA signature is genuine, Mrs. Coleman's true hand, obtained in her grief, but the co-trustee appointment, dated 3 years ago, was signed with an ink that was not manufactured until last year. It is a forgery, and the notary who stamped it is Priscilla Vane." The floor did not make a sound. Priscilla stood up so fast her chair fell, and here her own greed finished the job Ifeoma had only started. Because Priscilla Vane was not going down for a Coleman. She signed that power of attorney. She stamped it because Roland told me it was legitimate, she said fast and loud, snapping open her folder. "He forged his mother's document. He forged the numbers on the debt, and I have every
every recording to prove it. She threw pages on the table, Roland's voice transcribed, Roland's texts, the hidden loans he'd buried against the dealership. I was insurance. I always keep insurance. She turned to Preston Vane, and this was the overreach, the moment her hunger reached 1 inch too far. And you owe me my finder's fee, Preston, cousin. I brought you this deal, 12% in writing. Preston Vane went white, because now it was in the open, on the floor in front of the whole staff and a court reporter that Booker had quietly seated in the corner. The developer's inside contact was the notary who forged the trust, and the two were family, running the whole scheme from the inside. Priscilla had just confessed to save herself and buried 3 people doing it. Roland lunged for the recordings. Booker's hand came down flat on top of them. Those, Booker said, are evidence now. The cascade came fast, like a stack of tires comes down when you pull the bottom one. Preston Vane's firm withdrew from the sale before sundown and cut Priscilla loose in a 2-line email. By Monday, both their names were in a fraud complaint, family reunion and all. Priscilla's insurance folder, the one she was so proud of, became the state's Exhibit A against her own notary stamp. Odessa's forged co-trustee paper made her a party to it. The woman who wounded with doilies spent the following week explaining ink to an investigator, and she did not have a sweet word left. And Roland, who had frozen the accounts and moved the clock and cut a copy of his wife's key, was removed as CEO by the sole lawful trustee that same afternoon. The hidden debt he'd buried against the company followed him out the door, because it was in his name, not the trusts. He had leveraged himself, not her. He walked out of the building he'd bragged he owned, carrying a cardboard box, past the staff he'd made stand and watch, past Jelani, who held the door open and said nothing at all. At the door, Roland turned back to her, and for the first time in 4 years, he looked at Ifeoma like he was seeing her. "You let me think it was mine," he said. "All those years. Why?" Ifeoma picked up the brass key from the table and closed it in her palm. "Because my father told me the loud engine always shows itself in the end," she said. "I just had to let you rev." She did not raise her voice. "You were never the owner, Roland. You were a salesman I forgot to fire." She turned her back on him before he was through the door. She did not watch him go. She had a floor to run. 2 years later, the gold letters are gone. In their place, in her father's own handwriting cast in brass, the sign reads, Okafor Motors. Under it, on Saturday mornings, 20 young people from the neighborhood learn to rebuild an engine from the block up in a free training program Ifeoma runs in Solomon's name, because her father came here with 2 suitcases and a gift, and she decided the gift should keep being given. Booker still comes by to check the books and waste no words. Jelani manages the floor now. She promoted the boy who whispered her name. On the evening of the anniversary, after the students go home, Ifeoma walks the empty showroom alone the way her father used to. She checks the doors, she turns off the lights 1 bank at a time, and she locks the front the old way, not with a fob, not with a code, but with a worn brass key that fits a lock her father cut with his own hands, the only key that was ever real. Here is what that key taught her, and what I want you to carry out of here tonight. The ones who announce that they own everything usually own nothing but the noise. Real power doesn't raise its voice, it just quietly holds the key. If Ifeoma's story moved you, share it with a woman who's been underestimated 1 time too many. Subscribe so you're here for the next one, and tell me in the comments, when Roland walked out with that box, did he deserve 1 more word, or did she give him exactly enough? I'm reading every reply.